He stood at the top of the world. CEO. Applause. Cameras flashing. Power finally in his hands. That night, he looked at the woman who had stood beside him when he had nothing, and decided she no longer belonged in his future. No shouting. No tears. Just divorce papers slid across the table like a business deal. She didn't beg. She didn't fight. She smiled and walked away. What he never knew, what no one knew, was that years earlier, when the company was nothing but debt and broken dreams, she had quietly bought it all. The land, the patents, the shares. Months later, in a boardroom packed with powerful men celebrating his expansion, the doors opened. She walked in not as his ex-wife, but as the true owner of everything he thought he owned. And in that moment, as the room fell silent, he realized he didn't just lose his wife, he lost his empire. And this is where the real story begins. Before we dive into this shocking story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications bell so you never miss a lifetale saga that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you'll want to see every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of justice unfold. Click subscribe now, and let's uncover the secrets behind the empire, the divorce, and the woman who owned it all. Daniel Hart stood at the glass wall of the executive office, the city glowing beneath him like a conquered kingdom. From this height, the streets looked small, almost obedient, and for the first time in his life, Daniel felt larger than fear. Applause still rang in his ears from the board meeting downstairs. His promotion to CEO announced with champagne, smiles, and promises of an even brighter future. Cameras flashed. Hands shook his. Power wrapped around him like a tailored suit, expensive and intoxicating. Yet when he glanced at his reflection in the glass, something unfamiliar stared back. The hungry young man who once counted coins for rent was gone, replaced by someone sharper, colder. At home that night, Emma waited with a simple dinner and a soft smile. She listened as Daniel talked, not with her but at her, about markets, mergers, and how the world finally respected him. She noticed how his words no longer included "we." When she reached for his hand, he gently pulled away, distracted by emails and late-night calls. Emma told herself success was heavy and love meant patience. But as Daniel lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, a dangerous thought took root. Emma belonged to his past, not his future. And somewhere deep inside, he began planning a life that no longer included her. That very night, Daniel made a silent decision, one that would shatter everything he thought he owned. Years earlier, long before the corner office and the headlines, Emma had watched Daniel drown quietly in desperation. Bills stacked like threats, investors slammed doors in his face, and the company existed only as sketches on napkins and sleepless dreams. Emma never complained. Instead, she made a decision born not of control but love. She liquidated her inheritance, money left to her by a father who taught her that true power never shouts, and placed it into a private trust. No names, no applause, just protection. The patents Daniel celebrated as breakthroughs were filed under that trust. The land the company expanded on was quietly purchased by Emma's lawyers. She never told Daniel because she believed success tasted sweeter when earned. She believed in standing behind him, not above him. While Daniel rose, Emma stayed invisible, content with being the quiet foundation beneath a growing empire. But as the company grew, so did the distance between them. And Emma sensed something fragile cracking in the man she loved. Emma's secret was safe for now, but the walls of her marriage were already beginning to crumble. Daniel chose the moment carefully. A quiet evening. No guests. No witnesses. He spoke the word divorce like it was a business decision, not a betrayal. He told Emma she deserved someone better, someone simpler. He said his life was changing and she no longer fit. His voice was calm, rehearsed, and devastating. Emma listened without interruption, her heart breaking silently with every syllable. When Daniel finished, he waited for tears, for anger, for bargaining. None came. Emma simply nodded, her eyes reflecting a sadness too deep to argue. She agreed without conditions, without lawyers, without demands. She packed only what she needed and left him the house, the cars, the illusion of victory. As she walked out the door, she turned once and smiled. Not bitterly, but peacefully. Daniel mistook it for surrender. Daniel believed he had won his freedom, but Emma was walking away with something far more powerful. Single and celebrated, Daniel embraced his new identity with reckless hunger. The media loved him. Investors praised him. Luxury replaced intimacy, and admiration replaced love. Yet beneath the success, cracks began to show. Deals fell apart unexpectedly. Land acquisitions stalled. Legal obstacles appeared from nowhere. Daniel blamed incompetence, never suspecting the invisible hand tightening around his empire. At night, he found himself thinking of Emma's silence, her calm acceptance. It haunted him more than anger ever could. He dismissed the thoughts and doubled down on ambition, unaware that the foundation of his power no longer answered to him. The higher he climbed, the more unstable the ground became. A mysterious board meeting was scheduled, one that would change everything. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation as Daniel prepared to unveil the company's boldest expansion yet. Charts glowed, futures sparkled. Then the doors opened. Emma walked in, poised and radiant, carrying a thin folder. Conversations died instantly. Daniel froze as she introduced herself, not as his ex-wife, but as the majority stakeholder. When the documents circulated, Daniel's world collapsed line by line. Every asset, every patent, every inch of land owned by Emma's trust. She spoke softly, thanking him for leading her company so well. Then she voted, and the board followed. Daniel's reign ended in silence, but this was only the beginning of his fall. Daniel remained seated long after the boardroom emptied. The chair beneath him felt unfamiliar now, as if it belonged to a ghost of the man he used to be just hours earlier. His ears rang with the echo of Emma's calm voice, her gentle gratitude sharper than any insult. When he finally stood, his legs trembled. Executives who once laughed too loudly at his jokes now avoided his eyes. Some offered tight nods of pity. Others pretended not to see him at all. Power, he realized too late, was loyal only while it served others. The elevator ride down felt endless. Every floor passed like a chapter of his life closing forever. Outside, the city roared on, indifferent to his fall. Reporters had already gathered, whispers spreading like wildfire. Removed, ousted, unexpected reversal. Daniel pulled his coat tighter, suddenly cold despite the afternoon sun. For the first time since the divorce, he wondered if Emma had known this day would come. And if she had, why she hadn't warned him. As Daniel stepped into the crowd, his phone buzzed with a message that made his blood run cold. Emma stood alone in the same office Daniel once claimed as his kingdom. The view hadn't changed, but the meaning had. She didn't rush to sit in the CEO's chair. Instead, she walked slowly, touching the window, the desk, the framed awards. Each object carried memories, late nights, whispered encouragements, sacrifices unseen. She felt no triumph, only a strange, heavy calm. The board watched her carefully, uncertain how to treat a woman who wielded power without arrogance. Emma spoke with clarity and restraint, outlining her vision. Not expansion for ego, but stability, ethics, and long-term growth. Some directors exchanged surprised glances. They had expected vengeance. Instead, they witnessed dignity. Yet beneath her composed exterior, Emma braced herself. She knew reclaiming the company was only the first battle. The harder one lay ahead, facing the man she once loved. That evening, Emma received an unexpected request from Daniel himself. Daniel chose the restaurant they once celebrated anniversaries in, hoping nostalgia might soften the truth. When Emma arrived, she greeted him politely, like a stranger. The conversation was stiff, cautious, filled with words that avoided the past. Daniel finally broke. He asked why she never told him, why she let him fall so far. Emma listened, then answered quietly. She told him she believed love meant trust, not control. She said she wanted him to succeed as himself, not as someone indebted to her. Her words were not accusations, yet they cut deeper than anger. Daniel realized that everything he resented about her silence, her patience, had been her greatest strength. As dinner ended, Daniel made a desperate confession that Emma wasn't prepared to hear. Daniel admitted the truth he had buried beneath ambition. He confessed that he had divorced Emma not because she didn't belong, but because he felt small beside her goodness. Her unwavering support reminded him of the man he used to be, and the man he was afraid he'd never become again. Power had been easier than humility. Emma felt the weight of his words, old wounds reopening. Part of her ached to reach across the table, to comfort the broken man before her. But another part remembered the nights she cried alone, the cold dismissal, the papers slid across the table without compassion. Healing, she realized, did not require reunion. Emma stood to leave, but Daniel's final words stopped her in her tracks. Daniel asked for another chance, not as husband and wife, but as people willing to confront the truth. He didn't ask for the company back. He asked for forgiveness. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, stripped of pride at last. Emma paused, torn between past love and hard-earned independence. She told him forgiveness was possible, but trust would take time, and reconciliation was not promised. She walked away into the night, leaving Daniel alone with hope he hadn't earned but desperately needed. From a distance, Emma glanced at the city lights, knowing the next chapter of both their lives would be the hardest yet. Unknown to them both, a hidden enemy was already moving, threatening to destroy the company from within. The first sign of trouble came disguised as routine paperwork. Emma noticed discrepancies buried deep inside quarterly reports. Numbers rounded too neatly, contracts renewed too quickly, approvals granted without proper review. At first, she wondered if Daniel's chaotic leadership had simply left scars behind. But as she stayed late into the night, flipping through files while the building slept, a pattern emerged. Someone inside the company was bleeding it slowly, carefully, like a thief who knew exactly where no one looked. Emma's mind raced, not with fear but focus. She assembled a small, trusted task force and began a silent internal audit. No announcements, no accusations. The board was informed only in fragments. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the company. Rumors of instability, of leadership change causing weakness. Emma realized the enemy wasn't just stealing money. They were testing her authority, waiting for her to stumble. As Emma traced the fraud to a single executive signature, a familiar name appeared. Someone Daniel once trusted blindly. Daniel's days blurred together after the dinner. Without the company, time became his enemy. The phone no longer rang. Invitations vanished. Friends faded. He sold his watch, then his car, clinging to pride as it slipped through his fingers. Each loss stripped away another layer of the man he pretended to be. One rainy night, Daniel found himself standing outside the old apartment where he and Emma once dreamed aloud about the future. The windows were dark. He laughed bitterly, realizing how far he had fallen, and how much farther he still could go. For the first time, he admitted the truth to himself. Without Emma, he had never truly stood on his own. Just as Daniel accepted his lowest point, a knock on his door offered a dangerous opportunity. The man who stood outside Daniel's door wore confidence like armor. Victor Kane, former executive, recently dismissed, and now smiling too easily. He spoke of revenge disguised as justice. He claimed Emma was destroying the company's legacy and needed to be stopped. All Daniel had to do was help. Daniel listened, suspicion warring with desperation. Victor offered money, influence, relevance. He offered Daniel a way back into the world that had rejected him. But as Victor spoke, Daniel noticed the subtle arrogance, the same hunger that had once consumed him. The reflection sickened him. Victor revealed his final card, proof that could ruin Emma forever. Emma confronted the executive whose signature haunted her reports. He denied everything with convincing outrage, blaming accounting errors and legacy systems. Yet his eyes betrayed him, flickering, calculating. Emma knew then this was no lone wolf. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. That night, Emma stood alone in her office, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. For the first time since reclaiming the company, fear crept in, not for herself, but for the people who trusted her. She realized leadership was lonelier than love, heavier than betrayal. An anonymous email arrived, containing documents Emma never thought existed. Daniel returned Victor's documents unopened. He couldn't do it. He couldn't betray Emma again. Instead, he walked straight into the storm he once ran from. He went to Emma, unannounced, unprotected, carrying nothing but truth. When Emma saw him standing there, soaked from rain and pride alike, she almost closed the door. But something in his eyes stopped her. Daniel told her everything: Victor's plan, the internal sabotage, the looming threat. The silence between them stretched painfully long. Emma finally spoke. She thanked him, not with warmth, but respect. They stood on opposite sides of the same truth, no longer married, no longer enemies. Together, they now faced a war that could destroy them both, or bind their fates forever. Victor Kane did not wait for permission. By dawn, the company's stock dipped sharply, triggered by a coordinated leak to the press. Anonymous tips alleging internal fraud, leadership instability, and a looming federal investigation. Headlines spread faster than truth ever could. Emma arrived at the office to a storm of flashing cameras and shouted questions, each one sharper than the last. She kept her head high, but inside, she felt the ground shift. This was no longer a quiet internal war. It was public, vicious, and designed to break her. Inside the building, panic rippled through departments. Employees whispered in elevators. Partners paused negotiations. Emma convened an emergency meeting, her voice steady as she assured everyone that the company would face the accusations head-on. Yet even as she spoke, her legal team confirmed her fear. The documents leaked were selectively edited, true enough to be believable, false enough to destroy trust. Victor wasn't trying to win. He was trying to burn everything down. As Emma finished the meeting, authorities arrived unannounced, with a warrant in hand. The investigation moved quickly, ruthlessly. Servers were seized, accounts frozen, projects halted mid-breath. Emma spent sleepless nights answering questions, providing documents, defending decisions she had inherited, not made. Every step forward felt like pushing against a tide determined to drag her under. For the first time, doubt whispered, "What if dignity isn't enough?" Daniel watched the chaos from the outside, powerless yet painfully aware that his past leadership had created the cracks Victor now exploited. Guilt pressed on him like a weight. He wanted to help, but knew showing his face publicly could make things worse. Then a former compliance officer reached out quietly, offering information Victor had buried. The price was steep: risk, exposure, and no guarantee of forgiveness. Daniel agreed, stepping back into the fire he once ruled. Daniel worked in shadows, meeting sources in empty parking garages and forgotten diners. Piece by piece, he reconstructed the truth. Victor had been siphoning funds for years, building a network of shell companies, bribing auditors, and manipulating reports. Daniel realized with horror how blind he had been, how ambition had made him easy to deceive. When Daniel brought the evidence to Emma's legal team, he did not ask for credit or a role. He asked only that the truth be told. Emma listened from behind glass as the lawyers verified the files. She felt a conflict tear through her, relief that the company might survive, and sorrow that it took Daniel's fall to see clearly. Redemption, she realized, was not loud. It was costly. Just as the case began to turn, Victor made his boldest move yet. Victor held a press conference of his own, accusing Emma of orchestrating a coup and framing him as a scapegoat. He spoke with polished outrage, waving forged documents and half-truths like weapons. Markets trembled again. The board fractured. Trust, once broken, refused to heal easily. Emma knew silence would be mistaken for guilt. Against her advisor's caution, she chose to speak. Standing before cameras, she laid out the full timeline. Her trust, her ownership, Daniel's rise and fall, and the evidence of sabotage. She did not hide behind lawyers. She faced the public with calm honesty, even when questions cut deep. Somewhere in the crowd, Daniel watched, realizing courage looked nothing like power. As Emma finished, Law enforcement interrupted the broadcast. Agents moved swiftly, surrounding Victor before he could step away from the podium. The clink of handcuffs echoed louder than the cameras. Shock rippled through the crowd as charges were read. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The narrative shifted in real time, headlines rewriting themselves as truth finally broke through the noise. Emma exhaled for the first time in weeks. The company was bruised, but alive. Daniel slipped away unnoticed, satisfied that his role remained invisible. That night, Emma stood alone in her office again, city lights shimmering like fragile promises. Victory had come at a cost neither of them could yet measure. With the war over, a quieter question remained. What, if anything, still stood between Emma and Daniel? The morning after Victor's arrest felt unnaturally quiet. No cameras, no sirens, just the low hum of a company trying to breathe again. Emma walked through the halls unnoticed, employees offering tentative smiles, gratitude mixed with uncertainty. Trust, she knew, was not restored by a single victory. It had to be rebuilt, slowly, honestly, one decision at a time. She addressed the company not from a stage, but from the floor, speaking plainly about mistakes, accountability, and the road ahead. There were no promises of instant recovery, only commitment. As applause rose, soft at first, then steady, Emma felt something shift. Leadership, she realized, wasn't about winning battles. It was about staying when it would be easier to walk away. That evening, Emma received a resignation letter she never expected. Daniel's resignation was simple. No explanations, no requests, just gratitude for the chance to make things right, even briefly. Emma read it twice, her fingers tightening around the paper. Part of her felt relief. Another part felt loss. Not of a husband, but of a shared history that refused to disappear. Daniel packed his remaining belongings quietly. He didn't look back at the building that once defined him. Outside he paused, unsure where to go next. Redemption had cost him everything familiar, but it had also given him something new, self-respect. As he walked away, he didn't know Emma was watching from above, torn between letting go and holding on. Emma made a decision that would change both their futures. Emma found Daniel days later at a small community center, volunteering to teach business basics to struggling entrepreneurs. The sight unsettled her more than any confrontation. This was not the man who chased power. This was someone rebuilding quietly, brick by brick. She invited him to coffee, not to talk about the past, but the future. Emma offered Daniel a role outside the spotlight. Advisor, consultant, contributor, never CEO, never king. Daniel hesitated, knowing acceptance meant permanent humility. When he finally nodded, it wasn't ambition driving him. It was purpose. Just as they reached an understanding, old wounds threatened to reopen. Working together again awakened emotions neither had prepared for. Shared glances, familiar rhythms, unspoken regrets. Emma struggled to separate trust from affection, leadership from longing. Daniel, sensing the tension, kept his distance, determined not to confuse opportunity with entitlement. One late night, Emma confronted the truth she had avoided. Success had freed her, but it had also isolated her. Strength came with solitude. Daniel listened, offering no solutions, only presence. The silence between them felt heavier than any argument they'd ever had. Emma asked a question that Daniel feared answering. Emma asked whether Daniel still loved her, not as a plea but as a boundary. The question hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Daniel answered slowly, carefully. He said love never left, but he no longer believed love meant possession or return. He said he would walk away again if staying cost her peace. Emma felt tears she refused to shed. She realized then that forgiveness didn't demand reunion, and love didn't guarantee togetherness. They stood at a crossroads not defined by pain, but by choice. One final chapter remained, where destiny would decide what love truly meant. The board pressed Emma for answers about the future, succession plans, long-term control, legacy. The company had survived scandal and sabotage, but survival was not vision. Emma listened, taking notes, her face calm while her thoughts churned. That night, Alone in her apartment, she opened an old box of memories. Handwritten budgets, early sketches, letters from her father reminding her that wealth was a responsibility, not a crown. For the first time, Emma questioned whether ownership meant permanence. She had proven her strength. She had reclaimed her dignity. But did she want to spend the rest of her life guarding power? Or could she transform it into something that outlived her ego? The answer frightened her, not because it was unclear, but because it was clear. Emma drafted a proposal that would shock the board and the world. Daniel's quiet work began to attract attention. The entrepreneurs he mentored flourished, crediting his honesty more than his experience. An international firm noticed and offered him a lucrative executive role. Prestige, money, a clean slate. Everything he once chased stood within reach again. Daniel wrestled with the offer all night. Acceptance meant returning to the world that had broken him. Declining meant choosing a smaller life, quieter but true. At dawn, he wrote his response, hands steady, heart resolved. He sent the email, then turned off his phone. Emma was about to make an announcement that would intersect fate with Daniel's choice. At the annual shareholders' meeting, Emma unveiled her plan. She would step back from absolute control, transferring majority ownership into a public interest trust focused on ethical growth, employee equity, and long-term stability. Gasps rippled through the room. Power, she declared, should protect people, not trap them. The move transformed the company overnight. Employees became stakeholders. The culture shifted. Headlines called her visionary and reckless. Emma felt neither. She felt free. As applause thundered, she scanned the room, wondering if Daniel would ever understand what she had given up. That evening, Emma found a handwritten note waiting for her. Daniel's note was simple. He had declined the executive role. He thanked Emma for teaching him that worth wasn't measured in titles. He wrote that he was leaving the city to build something smaller, something honest. No bitterness, no expectations, just gratitude and goodbye. Emma sat with the note long after midnight, tears finally falling. Not from regret, but release. Love, she realized, did not always ask to be held. Sometimes it asked to be honored by letting go. At dawn, Emma made one last decision, purely for herself. Months later, the company thrived under its new model. Emma walked its halls less often, focusing instead on philanthropy, mentoring, and quiet mornings untouched by urgency. She had become something rarer than powerful, whole. One afternoon, in a small town far from glass towers, Emma stepped into a modest community center. Daniel looked up, surprised. She smiled, not with promises, not with expectations, but with peace. Their future was unwritten, finally equal, finally free. Because some love stories don't end with possession, but with possibility.